Hi, and welcome to VIBEZ Daily. This is a daily devotional curated by VIBEZ Church to help you practice the way of Jesus and be all that God has called you to be. You have joined us for our year-long series titled Devoted. Acts 2:42 tells us that the followers of Jesus were devoted to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, to breaking of bread, and to prayer. This podcast was created to provide context and commentary for what you read each day. Just before our friends begin discussing today's reading, we want to invite you not only for fellowship, but for prayer as well. We have created the VIBE Daily Chat Group to offer you fellowship and a community where you can state your observations, ask questions about the reading or the podcast. You can join us by downloading the VIBEZ Church app in your favorite app store. Click Join the Conversation and join us today. And finally, we hope that you can join us for prayer. Prayer happens Monday through Friday, and more information on that can be found on the VIBEZ Church app under prayer. Now, let's begin our conversation on today's reading.
All right, welcome back to VIBEZ Daily. It is day 44 of our Devoted series. So glad to have you back. And I am glad to be joined again by my wife, Victoria, and my friend, Shameeka. We are here to continue through Numbers. We did 5 chapters yesterday. We have 5 more chapters today. We're going to jump right into it, pick up here at chapter 6. Chapter 6 kind of has a very interesting topic for most of it. There's kind of a little refrain at the end, but it's dealing with what's called a Nazirite vow and kind of talks about what it looks like to be a Nazirite. Anything you guys thought was interesting, particularly in what just this vow here? Anything that jumped out to you guys in chapter 6?
Yeah, it seems so random to me, but I was like, who are the Nazirites? Like, it's already hard enough to keep up with these names, and I'm like, this is my first time hearing about it. And I did a little bit of research, and apparently, like, some of the famous Nazirites that we know are John the Baptist, Samson, and Samuel.
Right.
And I was just mind blown because I was like, again, like we just talked about how the Levites were just these set apart in their ways, and they were given these honorable tasks, and then now we have the Nazirite being something that pops up. So what were y'all thoughts? I was like, I feel like I still need more clarity on what this all consists of.
Yeah, I kind of took it as like the Lord giving the other Israelites an opportunity to set themselves apart too for him.
Yeah.
That's good.
So it wasn't like just the Levites who were appointed and ordained and consecrated, but it was like, okay, and if you have fervor in your heart and would love to make this vow to the Lord and dedicate yourself and show that and honor that in some type of way, not some type of way, the specific way, then you can dedicate yourself or your child or whoever like to be a Nazirite and raise them to be like a Nazirite.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, what I think I thought was interesting is because I had heard, I knew that Samson, Samuel, and John the Baptist were Nazirites. Like, I knew that. But I think, in my mind, I always thought it was a lifetime commitment. And I think the more that I read this, I didn't realize that you could be a Nazirite for a season, essentially. Like, you could commit yourself when we read this to, like, I want to go serve the Lord for whatever period of time. And this is how I prepare myself for that, how I sanctify myself, how I consecrate, I abstain from alcohol, I don't cut my hair, I do certain these things, and then I prepare myself, I serve, and then when I'm done, this is kind of what I'm, how I go back. And so I don't think I ever knew that you could be a Nazirite for a season.
Right,
Gotcha.
me neither.
Yeah, and I think that was what was surprising as I read through it this time, because again, Samson was a lifetime Nazirite.
Yes.
Samuel the same, and John the Baptist the same. Like they were at birth dedicated to be Nazirites.
Right.
So I thought that was just interesting to me that there was like this opportunity, as you said, for those that aren't Levites to still go serve the Lord if they wanted to.
I was about to say, in the fact that the women had the opportunity to be a Nazirite as well. I thought that was really cool to see that. But I'm glad that you guys kind of shed light on it and gave clarity, because I feel like it does give the people not just a responsibility but an accountability to continue to be holy and to continue to be set apart. And as we hear throughout these chapters and even in previous chapters, it seemed like the people were just so dependent on like Moses and Aaron that they didn't realize that they did have they do have a responsibility in their relationship with the Lord as well. So I think that this kind of helps to like also set that tone of like, no, like you are holding your set apart too, and there's like you can show that vow and dedication to me, whereas I just felt like they were just all like waiting for the next thing, but not really in it for real. Like their hearts wasn't really committed. In a certain way. So yeah.
No, that's I was gonna say let's not take Samson as an example, because Samson was not a great Nazarite. He was always touching stuff he wasn't supposed to touch.
Oh man,
and doing stuff he wasn't supposed to do. I was like, wait a minute, aren't you a Nazarite? Come on, boy, you're not supposed to touch these things. You're not supposed to do.
He was still a Nazarite, nonetheless. He wasn't a good one, but he was a Nazarite.
We're gonna look at Samuel.
Yeah, we'll get to him when we get to Judges. Okay, we aren't quite there yet, and we could throw all the shade we want to it at Samson at that point. But yeah, I did think this was interesting, just kind of that establishment, and like you said, that is what we will see when you get to like Samson and Samuel and John the Baptist. Like they articulate that these are the things that they could not do and they weren't supposed to be doing, and it was established way before in Numbers, which is cool.
Yeah.
Real quick before we get to 7, I mean, at the end of chapter 6, there's these beautiful verses in 22 through 27. This priestly blessing. Just pause here for a moment. I mean, what did that mean to you guys as you read those words?
It was just a sense of peace that I felt reading it, because I'm not only reading it from the standpoint of like this being spoken to the Israelites, but I'm like, I'm applying this to me in my life.
Yes.
And what I love about it is that just knowing the history of the Israelites, what they were going through, their thought process, knowing that they were discouraged at times, or like, you know, they're just not knowing what's going to happen there in this wilderness for years. Like that reminder that like God is like he's blessing them, he's with them, like he's gracious. Like I just felt like it was, and even like the ending part about giving them peace, I feel like for me that would be so comforting in that time, just to know that like, no, like God is still with us. And it seems like in a lot of ways God was only with them. Like sure, God is omnipresent, he could be anywhere, like, but he was with them, dwelling and constantly communicating with them. And so it was very comforting for sure.
Yeah, I think I love this right here because it was the Lord establishing his own blessing, right? Like before we've seen like people give blessings like Abraham and Jacob, and we see them giving these blessings to other people, and we've talked about the weight and the power of the words. So I'm like, but here we have an example of the Lord is like instructing his own blessing upon the people. Like this is what I want to say and what I want to cover the people with, and what blessing I want to give them. And it just made me think like, okay, so these are the things that matter to the Lord. Like these are the things that I should be praying for myself. Like, Lord, like, Lord, keep me, bless me, keep me, like, let your face shine upon me. Like, these are the things that I should be seeking, because some of these other blessings we've seen is like, you'll be a mighty warrior and your brothers will serve you, and you'll be, you know, riches and all this stuff. And it's like, this kind of like brought it back to like foundational and like home base. Like, this is what matters to the Lord. And when this is what he wants of his people. And so like, this was my prayer. Like, Lord, can this blessing be over me too?
Yeah.
You know, I agree with that wholeheartedly. That was probably my takeaway. Is that I feel like there was a weight to this blessing, more so that like it reminds me of the Lord's Prayer, right? And what Jesus prays, then that it's kind of like, okay, if this is the model prayer, like, and that all of my prayers should be modeled off of this. I felt like this is the blessing that all of my blessings should be modeled off after, right? And even when I speak over others, like I love verse 27. It said, "In this way they will pronounce my name over the Israelites," right? Like it's through this that they'll pronounce just who I am on them. And so like, it's almost again as followers, like, okay, if I'm praying for people, I want to pray this for others, right? I want to bless people in these words and use this as that foundation there. So I do. Again, it's amazing. They're amazing words, but I think, like you said, the weight of it really does come from like who established these words.
Which is why I feel like even this song that Elevation did with, what's her name, Curry Joe?
Cody,
that the weight of that song, I feel like that song always hits my heart deep, right? And so I think I even just love singing that song because I'm like, these are the Lord. This is great straight scripture.
Yes.
Like scrape. It's a straight scripture, and it's the Lord's words.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Good. So we go from that into chapter 7. Chapter 7 is one of those chapters that, like, I was gonna say personally, when I have read Numbers, it's the one that's kind of bothered me. It's not bad, but it's just kind of like, okay, we could have saved a lot of words here in this way. But chapter 7 is extremely long because it goes through the offering that each tribe brings. 12 days, 1 day each. Each one is
right.
has to bring an offering. And they bring, the exact same thing. Everyone brings the exact same thing. That's why I say it could be really summarized here. You could just say they brought one and then everybody else brought the same thing. But God goes through it anyway for us. Anything just big picture, chapter 7 that you guys thought was interesting?
Well, to your point, like, one, I did notice that it was every tribe, every, body, every tent, if you will, like, they were bringing their offerings. But my thought process as I was reading it, I'm like, okay, this is redundant. I made sure I paid attention to it because I felt like the reason why it was written down was to show their obedience to God. That, like, everyone did exactly as the Lord said. They brought the what they were supposed to bring, how many shekels they were supposed to bring. And of course it would stick out if it was like, oh, but this person was off, or like they didn't bring what they were supposed to bring. But I think there's something honorable to, like, look at and to see the obedience of, like, what they brought, and every tribe brought what they were supposed to.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that they provided wagons for the Levites. I'm like, look at the provision that, like, even the Lord was thinking, like, let me help y'all out.
Yeah.
And because I know you guys have to transport all of these things, because I often have in my mind, like, how do they carry all this stuff from place to place? Because they are moving around a lot. But the wagons made sense, and I was like, okay, wagons, the oxens, like, they got some help, like, for the exception of the Kohathites, the poor things, they had them on their shoulders. Okay. But not poor things, because they were next to the Lord's holiest pieces.
Yes.
So
they were chosen.
They were privileged. But the privilege comes with a burden. Come on, somebody.
That's right.
I'm preaching to myself.
She like, come on, somebody. Come on, me.
Feeling your help on your own. And
that was funny.
Oh, you good.
I'm on hype, man.
Busted out preaching.
That's hilarious.
I love it.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it was significant. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, but Nahshon being the first to present his offering, back to kind of what I referred to yesterday, and just some of the Jewish tradition. Essentially what they say is Moses and them were trying to figure out who should go first, and it was just obvious to everyone that Nahshon should go, because again, they kind of like elevated him specifically. So that's how Judah, although that tribe is not the oldest, from Reuben, who Reuben would be the oldest, that somehow that tribe ended up still going first.
And now that you mentioned his name, I've highlighted it now every time I see it.
Nahshon.
Yeah.
Is it called Nahshon? Because that sounds real hood.
It do.
Nahshon?
I would have said Nahshon.
Nahshon.
But that's still not like
Nahshon.
Look,
I don't know.
Either way, it sound like a brother.
He's like, he said Nahshon. I'm like,
I gotta hear the Bible read to me and tell me what it says.
I need somebody with some background, because it sound like he's from, like, Inglewood. Like,
hey man, maybe.
Nahshon from Inglewood.
That's hilarious.
I was gonna say in chapter 7 though, that verse 89 really did stuck out to me. It said, when Moses entered the tent of meeting to speak with the Lord, he heard the voice speaking to him from between the two cherubim above the atonement cover on the ark of the covenant of law, and in this way the Lord spoke to him. This was the first time this happened, right?
Yeah,
where God spoke to him in this way, and it just seems significant to me to see that that's what the Lord did.
Yeah. And it's exactly where the Lord said he would be, right? When he gave them the instructions to build it. I love it.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Well, chapter 8, we kind of deal with, again, just some other instructions when it comes to the tabernacle here. kind of in the beginning of it, and then we get into this consecration of the Levites. So, which is interesting because we kind of got some consecration instructions. I want to say it was Leviticus, I think we were reading specifically, but there are some areas where we'll see some repeating of some things. But anything that stuck out to you guys in the way that the Levites are consecrated here in this second portion of chapter 8?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit my thought for this chapter on the head was like, I can see why the Pharisees and the Sadducees like had this task role in keeping the law like together and keeping everyone informed on what the law said, because you said these instructions are spread all throughout these writings.
Yeah. That's true.
And it's like in one place they didn't mention that the Levites needed to shave their entire body and wash their clothes and cleanse themselves. But here, like scrolls later, it's here. And so it's like if I only looked at one part of what I was supposed to do as a Levite and missed this part over here, like I would be out of order. Yeah. And so I think it was interesting that he said there's continued to be layers, that like he gives them one instruction, then he adds on and do this and do that. And so the razor part really interested me because I hadn't seen that one before. Yeah. And then also I think it was interesting that in verse 19, he described the Levites as a gift to Aaron and his sons. Yeah. Like you were saying, like the help for Aaron and Moses and them, like I'm giving the Levites to you as a help, as a gift for these services.
Yeah. Which I feel like is an answered prayer, because even before Moses' assignment, he's like, I need some help. He gave him Aaron. And so like knowing that like we assume they're only going to continue to increase in numbers. This is like the help that they need. And so that was very thoughtful of God, right? To give them as a gift. But to your point, Victoria, like noticing the same things, like I try not to be like, okay, here we go again, more laws or instructions. Like God is giving them piece by piece. And I feel like that's a lot of times how we learn and how he has to do with us anyway. Like, let me give you this one instruction. Make sure you get that down pat. Let me see you execute it before I add on these other layers. Because if not, we're just like, okay, wait, what am I supposed to do? Like, you're really not able to attain that and really execute it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things that just really jumped out to me as well, and I know you guys kind of pointed out just the significance of some of the uniqueness of these instructions versus the instructions that kind of came before, right? Like you said, because I do love that, like what you just said, is that God does reveal this kind of in seasons, and that's also how our life works, right? Like I was even thinking as you were talking about, like, you know, Abraham and his story, right? God just kind of tells him to leave, and then he kind of reveals the next step. Kind of even the same thing when the people leave Egypt. It's kind of like just go, and you know, he shows some steps, and so there is that. But I think one of the things that just jumped out in this newest rendition of this consecration is, like, when I think about again how pure they had to be. It just again speaks to God's just holiness, right? Like it's amazing what they had to go through to be in his presence. And we've talked about this time and time again. Like it just continues to get reiterated and re-emphasized in my mind that, like, they gotta shave, they gotta be clean, they gotta do like it's like, man, like all of this just to be in God's presence. And again, I feel like the further we get into it, the more they gotta do to be consecrated and set aside. And I just thought that was very interesting. So at the end of it, we kind of get that retirement age thing we talked about again yesterday. So that's there at the end of 8. But then we kind of go into chapter 9, and back to your point of how long it's been. It's been so long that it's time for Passover again, right? Like they got to celebrate it and observe it again. And they kind of give some instructions for observing the Passover again, but also even for maybe some who couldn't be there for various reasons. Anything you guys thought was interesting in this first part of chapter 9?
I always appreciate them continuing to uphold this like tradition and, you know, the Passover, because it is a reminder of what God did for them in Egypt, but also how like this whole situation happened. So in verse 6 it says, but some of them could not celebrate the Passover on that day because they were ceremonially unclean on account of a dead body. And like we get to see this whole interaction in its conversation happen where it's like these people, they really wanted to celebrate it, but it's like, but I can't.
Yeah.
And how Moses' response in 8 was, wait until I found out what the Lord commands concerning you.
Love it.
I was like, come on, Moses. Like,
I love it.
I don't have the answer right now.
Right.
I don't. And I'm going to be honest with you and tell you, I don't have the answer. So I'm going to go to the Lord and I'm going to figure out. Like, I'm not just going to use my wisdom, my idea. Let me go ask the Lord.
Yes. And the fact, like, to me, I was just like, that leadership in itself and like even that choice was just so good because I'm like, man, he's really dependent on the Lord. He's not trying to do nothing without him.
I love it.
He ain't trying to let me not even, like you said, conjure up something. That verse, I had to underline that thing in the fact that with him going to the Lord did provide a way for them to still be able to celebrate it.
Yeah.
Sure did.
And they would have never, like, who would have ever known, like, had they not sought him, and because they probably would have automatically thought, well, we can't celebrate it all, we're gonna have to wait till next year.
Right.
And I think God honored that.
Yes. I was about to say, it was probably an honoring of their heart posture.
Yes.
That they couldn't be like, oh, well, we're unclean, can't do the Passover this year, wasn't trying to do it anyways, type thing. But it was kind of like a yearning of like, no, like, just imagine, like, boom, somebody dropped dead in your house.
Yeah, what you gonna do about it?
We can't leave it here.
Right.
Right? And just eat around
Sorry,
it.
that's
like,
not funny.
you know what I'm saying? Like, they're like, we gotta get this thing out of here. Like, come on. Like, we gotta pack up so-and-so. And so, they probably had no choice. It probably wasn't their heart.
Right.
To be unclean. But then it was like, we miss out on something that only happens once a year.
Yes.
And something that's meaningful, that gives glory to God. It's remembrance. Yeah.
And he said, and all the other millions, talk about FOMO, like, all the millions of other people is celebrating, and we're just sitting here.
Yeah.
Can't do nothing. So I do love that he honored their heart, honored their desire.
Right.
Yeah, no, I do. I love this part because I think particularly, you guys pointed out, like, just that dependency on God for the instructions.
Yeah.
I can confess, I would have just made a decision in that moment. Like, I would have just done what I thought was wise, right? And what I thought was best. And it would have either been, like you said, sorry, you just can't do it this year. Or, blur the line some, like, gotta understand, come on and just celebrate this Passover. You welcome too, right? Like, I don't know, but like, I would have done what I thought was wise, more than likely. Yeah. And so I felt so challenged by that verse because I was like, God, I want to get to that place. I want to get to that place that when I don't know what to do, I come to you, right? And not because I couldn't make a decision, because he could have made a decision,
right?
But I didn't have clear instruction, right? I could have made a decision, but I didn't have clear instruction from you. And so because you didn't give me an instruction, I don't know what to do. Yeah. That's how it's, and so like I love that he went back and again, you said he gives an option for what they can do. And you read it and go, oh, that makes sense. That definitely could have worked. But it's like, who cares that it makes sense and that it was wise and that was probably logical? What matters is that he went to God and asked him.
That's right.
And got his permission.
Yeah. It's that humility. That humility of Moses.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely see it. Right. Yeah, we get that later. That's where we find that he's the most humble. But yeah. So then kind of the second half of chapter 9 is something that we really we've heard before, where the cloud just kind of leads them and guides them where they go. And, when it stops, they stop and that kind of thing. And so it does guide them. And we'll get to the end of chapter 10 where they go first kind of from Mount Sinai. But we kind of refer, again, just kind of see the cloud leading them as they go. But as we get into chapter 10, there's this interesting kind of instructions regarding these two trumpets and kind of how these trumpets help communicate. I think this goes back to, for me, it went back when I got to this. I was like, okay, maybe this is helping me understand a little bit how they communicate with these millions of people. Right? I was like, I don't understand. Y'all ain't got cell phones. Yep. You ain't got TVs. You ain't got radio. You don't have a blowhorn of like, well, I guess the horn, but a megaphone. Like, you don't have this stuff that can like, hey, this is our next instruction. God thought of that too, right? Yep. He kind of gives, this is how they know what to do. Anything else that just jumped out to you guys in chapter 10 as he gives these instructions about how they use these two horns.
This is one of my absolute favorite passages. I don't know.
Interesting.
It is.
Okay, well, talk to us. Tell us why.
This is one of my, and let me just tell y'all, this is, verse 9 blows me away. When he says, and when you go to war in your land against your adversary who oppresses you, then you shall sound an alarm with the trumpets, that you may be remembered before the Lord your God, and you shall be saved from your enemies. And I'm like, just the simple blowing of this horn will save me from my enemies. You know how many times the Israelites go into battle and sometimes get conquered?
Yeah.
I'm like, wait, did we forget to blow a horn? Like,
you right. Look, my mouth just dropped because
you know
I was
what
like,
I'm saying? Like,
you
all
right.
we need to do is blow our horn, and the Lord will remember you. And so many times I just feel like, to your point, sometimes you just don't stop and pray, or don't stop and sound the alarm. Like, Lord, I need you.
Yeah.
And so I remember, and this is near dear to my heart, because one day I was having a terrible day with the kids. And I literally, like, just slumped down to my knees. And I literally made like a blow sound, like a trumpet. I was crying, literally. I was crying. This day's tough. I made a blow sound like a trumpet, and I was like, Lord, I need you to come save me. And he showed up for me.
Come on.
That's good. I mean, I don't think I knew that, as long as we've been married, that this passage is so impactful for you, and nor that story of you calling the trumpets to save you from our children.
Lord. But sometimes you need the Lord to rescue you.
Yeah,
you need little monsters.
I get it. Okay, so that's kind of the first half of 10 is that, and then it kind of ends with the people of Israel actually moving camp, right? So essentially right after Passover or so, they get up and they move camp. Anything here at the end of 10 that you guys thought was significant?
Yeah, I think it was interesting that, like, Moses summoned his, like, brother-in-law to come stay with him. It's not really clear to me that if he actually did stay or not. I'm not sure. But just the fact that he was like, come stay with us, and he was like, nah, I ain't going. And he's like, please come. And then that was the end of it. But I think it was really ironic, though, that they actually didn't get to the promised land, like in Moses' lifetime. So although he's summoning him and has all this faith that they will get to the promised land, and you know, we'll be gracious to you, and we'll look out for you when we get to this promised land, it's like they actually didn't even get to it. So I wonder if he actually did turn back and go to his people, or if he stayed and died in the wilderness with the rest of them.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
that's good. I think some other things I just noticed in general, we've talked about it again. Nahshon leading out this camp, kind of going first. This tribe of Judah still kind of here in the front. And then I just thought it was interesting, verses 35 and 36, just like what they declared. So like when the ark set out, Moses would say, arise, Lord, let your enemies be scattered. Those who hate you flee from your presence. And then when it came to rest, he would say, return, Lord, to the countless thousands of Israel. It's kind of like this. God was going before them when they were, when it kind of went out, and then like God would come and just rest among them when they stopped. So I just thought those were some interesting observations. But yeah, that really kind of brings us to the end of chapter 10 and end of our reading for today. And so again, glad that you joined us. Hopefully you'll come back and see us again tomorrow as we continue through Numbers and through our devoted series. But until then, take care. God bless.
Thank you for joining us for the VIBEZ Daily podcast. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, or download our favorite, the VIBEZ Church app. Visit vibes.church/devoted for additional episodes, notes, details, and the latest merch. Join us next time as we continue our journey through the Bible.